Okay, so we learned a little bit about variables, and so now we want to think about why we want to use variables. So if you've ever designed anything using software, you've probably had, if you're trying to design a logo or making something in Illustrator or Photoshop, you probably like had to move stuff around and you try to like line them up or whatever. Have you guys ever tried to do that? And it's kind of hard. You can't really get it exactly right. You kind of move it around. That variables, one of the things that we can use variables for is basically to like get rid of that problem. We know exactly where something is, and then we can align everything that way. So that's one advantage that we'll look at, and then we'll also add on top of that another advantage in a second. But let's say I'm drawing a self-portrait, and let's say I have let's just start out really, really simple. So I'm going to have my head. So I'm going to have an ellipse, or let's just do a circle at 200, 200, size 200. Okay, so I've got a nice big circle. And so now let's add my mouth. And for my mouth, I'm going to do a rectangle. I'm going to do it at 250, or no, I'm going to do it at 200x. Or no, what do I want to do it? Actually, let's just do an ellipse for now. So I'm going to do an ellipse for my mouth at 200x and 250y. So we're moving down a little bit. And I'm going to make it wide. So it'll be 100 pixels wide and 20 pixels tall. Okay. So now I have a head and I have a mouth. And so let's say I'm working on this design. And right now I only have a couple things. So there's not that much going on. But imagine I had like a million different body parts that I wanted to move. If I wanted to move my head and my mouth, let's say I just want to move it over by 5 pixels. I have to go over here and I have to find this value. I have to say, okay, add 5 there and add 5 here. Okay, so barely anything has changed, but I had to do 2 different things at the same time. Okay, now imagine I had to do that for like a million different things. Okay, so that's one thing a variable is useful for. If we have a piece of data and we can refer to it, we can change that data and not have to change every time we use it. Okay, so let's imagine we have this variable x, which stands for the x position, and we're going to start that at 200. Okay, so now instead of writing 200, which is hard-coded, okay, that means it can't change. It's just a number or a piece of data. Instead, I'm going to write x. So x is a reference to a number. So the computer knows, oh, okay, they want x. I'm going to go find whatever x is, and I'm going to use that. So it's a stand-in. It's like our zip code or your social security number or something like that. It's something that we can reference. Okay, so put x for both of these. Works fine. Now, if I want to move this over by 5 pixels, I just change that first number, and it's going to change both. So if I want to change this by 300 pixels, I just change that number, and we move everything over. So that's the first big idea.
If we have a bunch of x, do we only want to move head and mouth? Should I then like console log right underneath mouth?
No, so console.log doesn't change the number. It just tells you what the number is. Console.log actually doesn't do anything to affect what we see on the program, what happens. It's for us as a developer to understand what's happening in our program.
So if I have a bunch of like x and I really want to move those two, how can I do it without like altering all x in my portrait, I guess?
So if you have part of your self-portrait is your head, and part of it is like a background, and they're not connected. So then you would just have you could have a different variable. Like you could have like a variable, background x, or maybe just bx or something like that. So you just wouldn't use x for anything that you don't want to be part of the head. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so that works pretty good for the head and the mouth. But what if we have stuff that's not straight in a line, right? What if we have like an eye? Okay, so let's add some eyes. So I'm gonna add another circle. And I'm going to put this circle at 225 on X and 200 on Y. And I'll make it 25 pixels wide. Okay, let's move our head back to the center for a second. Okay, so we've got an eye. Okay, let's move it over even a little bit more. Okay, so now we've got this eye, but obviously if I put X here, it's just going to be in the center of the face, right? It's not going to move, or it will move now if I move X. If I say X is 300, my eye moves over, but I'm not a Cyclops. I don't want to have just one eye in the center of my face. So what do I need to do? I can take X, but then I can add to it. Okay, so I'm just going to say, well, I want this to be over there, but I can use addition, right? I can just use this simple operation to say, take whatever the value of X is, but then add 50. Okay, so we're moving over a little bit, so we're offsetting our X value by 50. So then I'll do that again. I'm just going to copy this, and I'm just going to subtract instead. So now I'll have two eyes. Okay, so now I can move this guy around. If I say 200 here, then we go back to the center. Okay, and these don't have to be the same. I could say X minus 40 if I don't want it to be exactly symmetrical. Maybe that's a little bit more interesting. But now I have this like one axis, this X, that moves back and forth on my canvas, and I can design around that. So last week when we made a self-portrait, we just kind of put stuff where we thought it would go, and that was fine. You can make a composition, but that composition can't move. Okay, this composition can move. So let's say instead of X equals 200, we said X equals mouse X. So now it's going to be whatever the value of my mouse is. Now I have a self-portrait that can move. So now you can start to imagine I can make a character in a video game. I can make an NPC. I can make an animated, moving object. I can make particle systems. All of the different things that you see happening in any type of digital interactive media, animation, all of it is based on this one idea that we can take a number and assign it to a variable and then change it. And then everything that we base everything on that value changing. Okay, so let's do this again with Y. And then I think I'll probably just let you guys, I'll go over one more thing, but then I'll let you guys work on stuff. Yeah, okay. So if I want to do Y, I'm just going to say, well, let's say Y equals mouse Y. And so now I just have to go through and think, okay, so let's put a reminder here what Y started as. So Y for the head started as 200. We can kind of think of this as like our origin point. So we have like one point that we start drawing from, and then we move stuff around based on that. Okay, so if I have mouse Y starts at 200, then if the head is at 200 already, then I can just put Y there, and that'll be fine. Okay, so now my head is moving on Y, but my mouth and my eyes are not, because I haven't updated those yet. Okay, this might be kind of fun. You might be like, this is cool. I'm just gonna, this will be my project, but we can add more to this. So then our mouth is 250. Okay, so we can think what was the original is 200. So how do I get to 250? Well, I just take the original, Y, and I add 50. So just like my eyeballs before. Okay, so now we've got our mouth moving. Okay, and then 200 for the eyes. That's super easy. We just put Y in there. So one of the things that's cool about using variables, and we'll see another example of this next, you would in programming, a lot of the time you think there's a lot of math in programming. And it's helpful to know math. But the thing that's kind of ironic is that actually if you understand the basics of programming, it does all the math for you if you understand how to tell it what you want to do. So right now, I'm not actually like putting any numbers in here. I'm just saying X and Y, and I'm letting the program figure out what those values should be for me. So, that can be a little bit easier. Okay, Um,
Question, how did we know variable y was supposed to be 200?
well, it doesn't really have to be 200, but I just based it on what I had originally started with.
The first. Does it have to reflect the first, like the circle is like the first thing, but does it have to reflect the first?
It's
Like, does
it's
that
not
have to be
because I wrote it first, but it's because that's where I started. I was like, this is where I want the middle of the face to be,
Okay.
and so I started it based on that. But it doesn't really matter that it came first in the program. Yeah.
So like, how do I apply like variables to different shapes?
Like,
So right now it's like the variable is set into like head, mouth, and eyes.
yeah.
But I want eyes is like the different from the X from the head. It's not like I want to give like a variable to
The size.
I mean, one variable for the head and then another variable for the eyes.
Like, but which aspect of the eyes? Like how big they are, or where they're positioned, or?
Oh, for example, let's say I want to move like head for the 5 pixel to the X axis.
Oh.
For like variable X for the head.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't want to move the eye because I don't want the variable function into the eyes. I want another variable function for the eyes.
Well, you can just use a different variable. So you could say like variable I x equals, I don't know, mouse x times 0.5 or something like that, just as an example. And then if I put this in here, it'll just use that value instead. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we'll actually learn in a couple weeks. We'll learn better, kind of like different ways to do that type of thing. But yeah, you can make up as many variables as you want. So for this example, I just have like one sort of like center with x and y. Oh, I forgot I took out y. But I could have lots of different variables that do different things, but I don't want to overwhelm you guys with different options. Okay. The main thing I want you guys to do today is just like design a self-portrait that has an x and y that you can move around like this. Okay. So then one last thing, if we want to do size, so let's say I have a variable for the size. I'm going to base it on this head. It's 200. Okay, so I'm going to say 200. So now if I change the size, so I'll put S here. So if I change the size, if I say it's 250, now the head changes, but the other stuff doesn't change, right? So you're going to notice something is going to happen here. So let's see if we can figure it out. I just saved, so it reformatted. So for the mouth, this 100 is half of 200. So the thing you're going to notice with size is it works differently than position. With position, I can offset by adding because I'm just moving left and right or up and down. I'm just adding. But with size, I'm getting bigger or smaller. So I have to change based on the ratio. So how big is something relative to something else? If something else grows, the other thing is also going to grow. So size is a little trickier. You don't really need to work with size if you don't want to, but I just want to show as another example. So if I want to do size, I'm going to leave this here. I'm going to comment this and just copy, whoops. I'm going to copy and paste this line and comment this so I can remember what it was. So for size, if the mouth is 100 pixels wide, and the head is 200 pixels wide, that means that the mouth is half the size. So if I want this to be relative, I can say size divided by 2. Or I could say size times 0.5. Okay, so now this is fine. And if I change the size to 300, so now the mouth gets bigger and the head. But another thing that you might notice is that the offset doesn't change because it's still 50 pixels from the origin. So working with size, not only do we have to change the ratio, we also have to change that original offset. So that's where things get really tricky, and we can use yet another variable for this. So if I want, let's call O our offset, and let's say for this it's 50. So I'll say 50 here. Okay, so then what I would want is instead of actually hard coding this, so I'll put O here just to start. What I actually want is the ratio of the size to the offset. So what I really want is size, remember, originally was 200. And so what I really want is this ratio. So 200 divided by 50 is 4. So what I really want is size divided by 4. So now if I change the size to 300, it also changes that offset. So the mouth also moves down from the center. This is probably more complicated than is necessary for right now. The main thing I want you guys to do is just the X and Y part for today. But some people will wonder, well, how do I do this? And that's how you do it. So I'm gonna leave that out for now. I'll leave it there so you guys can see it, but it's not necessary for the project. The main thing I want you guys to do is the X and Y's. If you do that and you're like, that was easy, then maybe think about adding the size in. But yeah, that's the basic idea. You want to design a self-portrait, and as you design it, it should move around the page. So if you use this, I'll save this, and I'll put it as a template you guys can use. Let me actually go ahead and add it to, I'll call this moving self-portrait. And I'll add this to the class examples. So if you want to find that, if you're on the class page, you can go to class examples, and you'll see this moving self-portrait down here. You can duplicate that and start building your own self-portrait. And yeah, that's what we're gonna work on today. So the assignment is just to recreate your self-portrait. It doesn't have to be like 100% recreation, or if you just wanna draw something new, that's fine. But the idea is to use the variables and the offset in a way that, it's still gonna move around and, keep its basic format. So yeah, let me see if is there anything else? No, okay. So I'll stop there. We'll have some workshop time. At 4, we're gonna do a different thing. We're gonna do our debugging exercise. So that's like an in-class assignment that hopefully won't take too long, but I'll go over that at that point. But I'll give you guys some time to work on this now. If you have any other questions or you need help with the self-portrait assignment or anything else like that, just let me know, and I'll come take a look.